Okay, creating textures. There's a lot of different ways to create texture using watercolor. The first way is using something that we should all have as we're painting, our paper towel. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to create a really concentrated wash, a wash that has a lot of color. I'm going to use blue, and so I'm going to create and prepare my paint over here and make sure that, notice how I'm using a lot of paint, making sure I have enough water and that I have enough to really saturate my brush, but I want to dissolve a lot of pigment in this paint, okay, so that it's going to be a really intense color. Okay, and so I have enough now to really saturate my brush. I'm going to paint an area with this relatively concentrated blue. Notice how I'm using a lot of paint. There's a lot of water. It's kind of pooling around. That the paper is really wet right now, and that's good. Okay, and so what we're going to do is I'm going to use my paper towel. It's already all crinkled up, but I want it nice and crinkly. And I'm going to use the paper towel just to kind of very lightly blot the surface, and you can see how it's starting to create the texture. That parts of it is lifted away. I'm getting the crinkly texture of that paper towel. Okay. And now you can do the same thing with not a paper towel, but actually a plastic bag, which is, it's the same technique, but it acts a little differently because plastic is not absorbent. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to paint a section here. I'm going to move this over first. Running out of room. There we go. All right, so I'm painting a section of the paper, making sure, again, there's lots of pigment. It's a nice concentrated deep blue, and there's lots of water on that paper. You can see how that water is just kind of flowing around, right? All right, so I'm gonna do the same thing. I have a grocery bag here, and so I'm gonna use this grocery bag. I'm gonna kind of ball it up, crinkle it up, and I'm just going to, I'm just kind of moving the paint around, right? It doesn't really absorb the same way that paper towel does, but it just kind of moves it around, okay? And so it's the same kind of idea, but a little bit different effect. So you can really see the texture, right, that the paper towel made. Pretty cool. Okay, the second, or the third way to make texture, I'm going to do the same process of preparing my paint, making really concentrated color, but also with a lot of water, okay, so that I can saturate that brush. All right, put it right here. This time, what I'm going to do is that while this is still wet, and notice I've used a lot of water, lots of water, I'm going to take some salt. This is kosher salt, so hopefully this will work. I usually use table salt. Oh yeah, it does. So I'm going to sprinkle some salt on that surface, and you can kind of see what it's doing is it's starting to absorb some of that pigment, some of that water. And it's going to create a texture on that surface. But I can't really do anything yet because it has to dry. And so once it dries, and as it dries, you'll notice on your own, it's going to start to create this very interesting, kind of very unique texture. So I'm not going to do anything until it dries. Once it does dry, I will brush off the surface and kind of get rid of the little salt granules. okay? But I can't do anything until it dries. So that's the salt technique. And the last one is what we call sgraffito. And sgraffito is where you take a sharp object, which I should have here. There it is. I have a nail. So anything that has a point and that you can scratch into the surface of the paper. What you can do is that before you even paint, you're going to scratch and scrape into that surface of the paper. You can draw whatever you want. I'm just making some random scrapes. And then take your paint and paint into the surface. And as you see, you can see the scratches that I made. Okay, I could even like take up some of that paint and some of that water, and you can see it even more now. All right. And so that's called sgraffito. So these are some different, and there are many different ways to create texture. You might find your own way. You can experiment with using different things to create texture in the surface of the watercolor. But you should definitely try out these 4. Salt, paper towel, plastic, and sgraffito, where you scratch into the surface of the paper.